At 2 o'clock a.m., the entire neighborhood security system gave up the ghost. Like 1 second we were Fort Knox, next second we were Flintstones. Garage doors frozen, motion lights stuck like confused ghosts, alarms that used to chirp with attitude just sat there like dead parrots. Nobody knew why, but I did. Not at first. At first I thought a raccoon union decided to riot. But the truth? The truth was dumber than fiction, because at 12:17 a.m., President Karen, yeah, that Karen, climbed onto my roof in leopard leggings, a tennis visor, and what I can only describe as spiritual delusion, and painted over every solar panel with beige latex paint. Beige, the color of defeat, the color of dried oatmeal, the color of, I have no imagination, but lots of opinions. She posted a selfie at 12:39 a.m. with the caption, "Improving our neighborhood one eyesore at a time." Ho, strong, strong. Ma'am, this ain't visual harmony. This is sabotage wrapped in narcissism with a brushstroke of felony. Oh, and before we go any deeper, hit that like, comment, if your ho-ho's got a Karen too, and subscribe, because you're going to want front row seats to this demolition derby of suburban drama. Now, here's the kicker. Those solar panels, not just mine, not just powering my house or heating my pool, those panels fed the entire community's security grid. Yep, 5 years ago, when break-ins started feeling like open mic night for burglars, the HOA, before Karen hijacked it, voted to install a solar-powered, encrypted surveillance system. It wasn't public knowledge where the panels lived, for obvious reasons, but I'll give you one guess where they were installed: my roof. And who designed, installed, and maintained them? Yours truly. Because unlike Karen, I actually understand how power works, both electrical and political. So when I woke up that morning and my emergency battery system screamed like a caffeinated toddler, I knew something was wrong. The main server bank was dead. Solar input? Zero. I blinked like 5 times and still saw zero. Checked the camera feed. What did I see? Beige. Beige across every panel, like someone tried to rebrand my roof as a piece of toast. And not just any beige, fresh, shiny latex beige with roller marks still glistening in the footage. You know what's wild? The camera caught her in full action. Leopard leggings shining under moonlight, paint roller in one hand, ladder in the other, humming some opera remix like she was auditioning for HOA Idol. I had footage of her waving at the camera like she knew it was watching, but also believed she was the hero in a musical no one asked for. I laughed. Then I blinked. Then I stopped laughing, because this wasn't a prank. This was a full-on Karen offensive disguised as community service. And the worst part, she thought she was helping. Like I was the villain with my dark, sinister-looking roof panels, and she was the beige-wielding saint sent from Pinterest to deliver salvation. My phone lit up with notifications like a Christmas tree on Red Bull. First was Officer Grant, asking for overnight footage because of a robbery near the main road. Then, Mr. Delgado, garage door wouldn't open. Then texts from half the neighborhood. Lights out, alarms frozen, someone's sprinkler ran for 3 hours like it thought it was Niagara Falls. I'll say this, Karen didn't just vandalize my roof, she murdered the neighborhood's last line of defense, and I'm not using that word lightly. The only reason crime stayed low around here was because of that grid. Silent, solar, and smart. And she smothered it in beige like it owed her child support. I stood there with my phone buzzing like a wasp nest, staring at footage of her humming and painting, and all I could think was, why paint over something that was working? Why destroy the one thing protecting the very people she claims to lead? And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about color. This wasn't about design. This was about control. Karen didn't like not knowing where the power came from. She didn't like not being able to touch it, monitor it, claim it. She wanted it gone so she could install something she owned, something she could manipulate. And knowing Karen, probably something she could profit from. Because HOA power isn't about fences or grass length. It's about knowing who's in charge when the lights go out. So yeah, the neighborhood woke up confused. Garage doors wouldn't budge, motion lights were dead, security cameras offline. But me? I woke up to a paint job that told a bigger story, one of ignorance, arrogance, and sabotage in sabotage. And as I stood in my living room with a backup server running and beige footage looping like a bad prank video, I realized something else. This wasn't over. This wasn't a one-woman makeover. This was step one in something way bigger. Because nobody climbs a roof with a roller at midnight just for fun. Not unless they're hiding something. Not unless they're trying to kill what they can't control. And Karen? She didn't just kill the power, she lit the fuse. So stick with me, hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and buckle in. Because next up, I knock on her door. And trust me, she answers like she just saved the planet while the neighborhood burned behind her. I wasn't even fully dressed when I knocked on Karen's door. Still had sock lines on my ankles and caffeine on my breath, but my patience had already clocked out for the day. And there she was, answering the door like she'd just stepped off the set of a 1950s detergent commercial, hair wrapped, housecoat starched, and a smile that could curdle cream. She looked downright proud, like the woman had just solved world peace with a bucket of latex. Before I could say a single word, she raised one finger, like a conductor about to cue a brass section, and launched into her opening number. Said she'd meant to talk to me about my panels. Said their dark color clashed with the HOA's visual harmony palette. Said she took the initiative to enhance property values by neutralizing the aesthetic pollution on my roof. Aesthetic pollution. Like solar energy was graffiti now. I stood there, blinking, somewhere between disbelief and the urge to start slow clapping out of sheer shock. I told her, real calm, that those panels powered the entire neighborhood surveillance grid. Her smile flickered, just for a second. But then she laughed, not a nervous laugh, a you're so dramatic kind of laugh. Said she thought they were just my personal eco-toys, that I'd tricked out my house with gadgets to flex for the neighbors. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her the footage, her on the ladder, paint roller in hand, humming what sounded like a mashup of opera and 90s dance music while she defaced the panels. I had time-stamped clips, multiple angles, and even audio of her saying, "They'll thank me when this place looks like a luxury spa." Her smile vanished faster than HOA funds during patio season. And what did she do next? Oh, she didn't apologize. She went full Karen, denied it was her. Then, when denial didn't stick, she blamed me for not labeling the panels properly. Said if it was such sensitive equipment, I should have marked it off with caution tape or a little sign. I told her I had a contract signed by the previous HOA board. That's when she smirked. That slow, smug smirk that usually comes before someone pulls a power move they think you can't beat. Well, she said, good luck finding it. Back in my basement, I opened the fireproof cabinet where I kept all original HOA records, and let me tell you, when I say my spine went cold, I don't mean figuratively. The folder with the solar surveillance agreement? Gone. Just gone. In its place was a single typed letter, unsigned, unsealed, generic as store-brand oatmeal. It said the solar surveillance initiative had been canceled and no longer fell under HOA jurisdiction. It looked real enough to fool someone skimming, but I built that cabinet, I secured that cabinet, and no one, I mean no one, had access to it except me, which meant someone broke in. Not to steal valuables, not to ransack, just to erase. That was the moment everything changed. This wasn't about Karen hating dark-colored roofs. This was about Karen wanting the system dead and cleaning the paper trail to make it happen. You don't forge letters and sneak into fireproof safes because you're passionate about pastel rooftops. You do that when you're hiding something bigger than anyone else knows to look for. My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from Officer Grant asking for overnight surveillance footage related to the robbery 2 blocks down. I couldn't give him anything. The footage was toast. Then Mr. Delgado called again. Garage still frozen shut, couldn't get his car out to make his doctor's appointment. Meanwhile, my group chat was lighting up with things like, "My sprinklers won't stop, and is it just me or is the motion sensor going nuts?" And the entire time, Karen's out there liking her own post about modernizing the neighborhood with brighter, cleaner lines. What kind of monster paints over the community's safety system and then hashtags it vibrant future? I'll tell you what kind. The kind that doesn't want the neighborhood to see. The kind who needs the cameras off while they make their real moves. Because the only thing worse than a power-hungry HOA president is a power-hungry HOA president who thinks no one's watching. And that's when Jack showed up. Jack from 2 houses down, phone in hand, shaking mad, said his daughter's bedroom security feed had gone down during the night. Not just down, scrambled. He tried calling the HOA line and it routed to a disconnected voicemail. Then Mrs. Lopez came running, saying their garage door glitched and nearly crushed her bumper. Within minutes, half the street was on my lawn, waving dead phones and half-frozen app dashboards. Karen came outside, trying to reassure people, said she was acting in the best interest of community property values. But that mask, it was already cracking. I looked at the crowd, neighbors I'd known for a decade, and I realized it was time. Time to lay it out. Time to expose the game. I told everyone to meet at the HOA building at 6:00 p.m. Told them I'd bring proof. What I didn't tell them was that I'd just discovered the first layer of something deeper. This wasn't about painted panels. This was about what those panels might have been preventing people like Karen from doing at night. So if you're watching this and thinking, wow, that escalated fast, yeah, it did. And if you've ever dealt with someone who smiles while they erase your hard work, then you already know what's coming next. I'm not just talking HOA drama. I'm talking fake letters, forged records, and something big enough to risk a whole neighborhood's safety for. Hit that like if your community's ever been hijacked by someone who thinks they know best. Comment if you've ever had to fight a system from the inside. And definitely subscribe, because next, I go digging through the one place Karen didn't erase. My encrypted backup drive. And what I find? Well, it ain't beige. I didn't walk into that HOA meeting with anger. I walked in with receipts. Literal ones, contracts, emails, time-stamped backups. If Karen wanted to play Monopoly with HOA bylaws, she should have read the fine print, because I don't lose games I helped design. The community center was packed. Not your usual lukewarm turnout of 5 bored retirees and a guy there for free donuts. No, this was standing room only. Jack was there, arms crossed. Mrs. Lopez brought folding chairs from her trunk. Even Mr. Wheeler, who usually slept through every meeting like it was background noise, had a notebook in his lap and a sharp look in his eye. And then in walked Karen, 10 minutes late, holding a binder thick enough to choke a tax attorney, wearing a blazer that screamed, "Yes, I vandalized, but make it chic." She smiled, waved, thanked everyone for coming, and jumped right into a slideshow like we were at a Suburban TED Talk. Slide 1, her posing next to trimmed hedges. Slide 2, her in front of color-coordinated mailboxes. And then, Slide 3, there it was, my roof, painted beige. Her arms stretched like Moses, revealing commandments from the mountaintop. She said, "This was a necessary correction. A visual eyesore eliminated for the greater aesthetic peace." Folks gasped, some even clapped, until I stepped up with my flash drive. Calm, slow. I plugged it in like I was just setting up a playlist, hit play, and let the footage roll. The room turned quiet real fast, Karen's voice humming, her commentary about how the panels were off-brand, the ladder, the paint strokes, her own voice saying, "They'll thank me when the HOA newsletter features this makeover." Dead silence. People started shifting. Then came the footage overlay, her signature on the original solar surveillance contract from 5 years ago, backed by digital timestamps and board approvals. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. Karen tried to interrupt. Said the footage was edited, that I'd deep-faked her face. Said my files were fakes created with AI. But before she could finish the sentence, the door creaked open, and in walked Phil. Phil hadn't been seen in a board meeting since Karen steamrolled her way into power, but there he was, carrying a box full of paper files, board minutes, original sign-in sheets, even old HOA checks that proved the solar system was funded, approved, and maintained. Until Karen cut it off without telling anyone. The shift in the room was seismic. You could feel it. People stopped doubting and started connecting dots. The silent ones in the back started murmuring. Someone asked, "Why was this never discussed?" Karen tried to reframe, said it was an outdated system, that she was only trying to modernize the neighborhood. But no one was buying it anymore. Not after watching her climb a stranger's roof in the dead of night with a can of paint and a plan. Then came the kicker. Mr. Wheeler, the same man who once slept through a 2-hour debate about mailbox paint colors, stood up and called for a formal vote of inquiry. Just like that, Karen's power started crumbling in front of her. She shouted, tried to regain control, called it a misunderstanding, claimed Phil and I were running a smear campaign. But her voice was already drowned out by the sound of a community waking up. That night, she wasn't stripped of her title officially. Not yet. But she lost the room. And in HOA politics, that's how queens fall. Not with a bang, but with a binder. No one believes anymore. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I walked home with my thumb drive in one hand and a 1,000-pound feeling in my chest, because Karen didn't lose like someone caught red-handed. She lost like someone who'd already planned for a round 2. No tears, no tantrum, just that stare. The kind you give when you're already thinking 10 moves ahead. And that's what got me. Not the damage she caused, but the way she slipped out without looking back. That's when I knew. This wasn't over. She didn't climb that ladder just to cover panels. She did it to cover tracks. And now I had to figure out what else she buried before the next storm hit. This sounds like your HOA nightmares multiplied by 10. You're not wrong, but you haven't heard the wild part yet. Because next, I dig into my encrypted drive, the one even I forgot I made, and what I find? Let's just say beige paint was the least invasive thing Karen left behind. So hit that like button if you've ever wanted to expose a fraud with a flash drive. Drop a comment if your HOAs ever played dictator dress-up. And be sure to subscribe because next up, I find the black box she didn't know existed. And trust me, that little file, it's got claws. The thing about paranoia? Sometimes it pays off. Years ago, when I built the original surveillance grid, I didn't just install the panels and call it a day. I made backups. Off-grid, offline, off everyone's radar. One of them was a tiny hidden node disguised as an attic vent. A dummy panel that didn't power anything but recorded everything. I never told the board about it, not even in the paperwork. I figured if someone ever messed with the system, or with me, I'd need an ace up my sleeve. And guess what? Karen never found it. So when I sat down and cracked open that encrypted archive, I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for the truth. What I found hit harder than any HOA fine she'd ever thrown my way. I rewound the footage to before the night she painted the panels. What I saw wasn't just Karen on a ladder with delusions of design stardom. It was her, alone, after midnight, making repeated trips to the HOA storage shed. Supposedly locked and filled with folding chairs and plastic pumpkins. Except she wasn't hauling in decorations, she was moving boxes. Heavy ones, 10, maybe more. She dragged them from her car with a dolly and struggled with each load. One box tipped. I froze the footage and enhanced the side. What I saw? A barcode and a vendor ID. It was from a security tech company. Not just any vendor either, the same one the HOA contracted 5 years ago when we built the original system. That's when the chill crawled up my back. Karen wasn't just trying to erase the old grid, she was halfway through building her own. And she wasn't alone. Nobody buys that much equipment under their name and stores it in plain sight unless they're real confident the paperwork's hidden. So I checked the HOA's recent budget. Nothing listed. No new expenditures. But I cross-referenced vendor activity using an old account ID from when I first did business with them. Boom. A bulk purchase. 2 months ago. Different buyer name, same delivery address, the community center. Karen had ordered the gear through a ghost buyer. That meant she was going dark on purpose. No board approval, no resident knowledge, just a silent surveillance empire forming under our noses. and I had proof. But I needed more than timestamps and vendor codes. I needed to see what she'd built. That's when I called Joel. Joel and I go way back. We used to build systems for law enforcement before he turned freelance. These days, Joel's a cybersecurity contractor by day and digital locksmith by night. When I told him what was going down, he asked one question. Does it involve Karen? When I said yes, he laughed and said, give me an hour. By dusk, we met by the storage shed. Joel looped the building's external cameras with old footage, giving us a window to slip in unseen. The shed had a fancy digital padlock with a fingerprint scanner. Joel pulled out a reader the size of a thumb drive, tapped it twice, ran a bypass script, and clicked. It opened. Inside, it wasn't holiday junk. It was rows of unopened cameras, signal repeaters, hardwired routers, and a local server hub that was already humming. Karen hadn't just started this project, she'd activated it. And the server? It had test footage. Joel ran a download sweep while I looked through the stored clips. What I found made my stomach lurch. It wasn't just street angles or shared walkways. There was footage from inside private backyards. One clip showed the Thompsons' pool. Their daughter was outside, maybe 10 years old, playing by herself. The camera was mounted high enough to see inside their kitchen window. Another clip showed Jack's patio. One showed Mrs. Lopez unloading groceries. None of them had been notified. None had given consent. Karen had been recording people in their own spaces, illegally, secretly, and worst of all, deliberately. This wasn't HOA oversight. This was personal power. Digital eyes where they didn't belong. And now I had the receipts. We documented everything, photos, metadata, inventory logs. We didn't move a single item, just enough to build a case. Joel pulled the entire drive for evidence and encrypted it in triplicate. When we stepped out, the door locked behind us, just like we found it, but I knew we couldn't sit on this. Karen had crossed a line. Beige panels were cosmetic war. Secret surveillance? That was felony territory, and I wasn't about to let her twist this. So I compiled a report. Not to the HOA, not to the board. I sent it to the county compliance office and the local DA, anonymously, for now. Then I prepared a second version for my neighbors. Because this time, Karen didn't just silence the system, she violated the people it was meant to protect. If you're still watching and wondering how far one HOA president will go for control, let me tell you, it doesn't stop at fine print and Facebook posts. Sometimes it creeps right into your backyard without you ever knowing. So hit like if you've ever felt like someone was watching when they shouldn't have been. Drop a comment if you think HOA power needs a little more oversight. And subscribe now, because next, Karen strikes back, and she doesn't use a brush. This time, she uses fear. The next morning, I woke up to find flyers taped to every gate, mailbox, and stop sign like we were hosting a yard sale for paranoia. Beware, resident hacking HOA system, private data at risk, they read. No name signed, of course, but the font screamed Karen, and the drama screamed desperation. She was flipping the script like it was a pancake breakfast at the community center. According to the flyer, I was now the villain, illegally harvesting neighbor footage, misusing technology, and endangering community trust. I stood there, holding the paper, blinking at the irony. Karen had built a secret surveillance system that could have aired on Dateline, and I was the one getting labeled a tech creep? It would have been funny if it wasn't so dangerous, because fear spreads faster than facts. And Karen was betting on it. By noon, the texts started. Not the supportive kind, the, hey, what's really going on kind. I saw it in the eyes of the neighbors walking their dogs a little faster past my driveway. I saw it in Mrs. Thompson's nervous wave. Even Jack hesitated before asking, "You didn't really record people, right?" I don't blame them. If someone told me there was a guy down the street hoarding backyard camera footage, I'd freak too. Karen didn't just lie, she planted a time bomb. And now, if I didn't act fast, her fiction would become the community's truth. That night, I called for an emergency town hall meeting. Not through the HOA, just a gathering, no agenda, no titles, just facts. And this time, I wasn't coming alone. I printed everything. Photos from the shed, equipment manifests, vendor receipts, time-stamped downloads. I had Joel record a video statement explaining the tech trail. Clear, calm, with no jargon. We weren't playing courtroom. We were just showing what she'd built and what she'd done. I even highlighted how she'd accessed HOA funds through ghost vendor accounts, the kind of thing that makes a board nervous and a prosecutor hungry. At 7 o'clock sharp, the room filled up again. This time, it wasn't just the HOA regulars. We had retirees, busy parents, teenagers, people who hadn't shown up for anything but July 4th, BBQs and tax rebate check-ins. They all came, holding on to curiosity, concern, or maybe just popcorn. And right there, in the front row, like she was waiting for an encore, sat Karen. Same folded hands, same emotionless stare, but I noticed something different. Her smile was gone. She wasn't here to charm, she was here to control the fallout. I didn't waste time. I walked to the front and started with the basics. The solar system, the original contract, and the timeline of its sabotage. Then, I played the video of Karen painting the panels. Gasps, murmurs, a few quiet unbelievables. But I wasn't done. I explained how the backup footage revealed her new system, the secret one, and then I dropped the real weight. The backyard camera feeds, the time-stamped angles, the storage path tied to HOA logins. I showed them where the cameras had been hidden, the ID tags from the vendor, and the internal HOA emails authorizing nothing. Just silence. Because she didn't have approval. She had ambition. Then I paused, looked at the crowd and said, "Everything I just showed you, that wasn't found through hacks. It was hidden in plain sight." I stepped back, ready to close, when Karen stood. Calmly, like a senator in a press conference. She claimed her system was a temporary safety enhancement, meant to fill the gap after mine had gone down, said I'd refused to share my access, painted herself as a reluctant hero, forced to act under pressure, said some test cameras accidentally caught private moments but had already been deleted. She wrapped it in concern. She used words like security and modernization and community safety, like she was weaving a blanket of plausible nonsense. And I'll give it to her. It almost worked. Until a teenager in the back stood up and asked, why was one of those cameras pointed at my sister's window? The air in the room stopped moving. Karen flinched. Barely. But it was enough. Someone asked if she'd ever told the board. Another asked why the purchase records were under a fake name, and then, like a floodgate cracking open, questions poured in. Voices got louder. Someone yelled, "You lied to us!" Karen tried to respond, but this time the room didn't care. It wasn't about HOA bylaws or landscaping codes anymore. It was about privacy, about trust, about a leader who violated both and smiled through the fallout like she was hosting a bake sale. A hand went up for a vote, not official, just community sentiment. Do we trust Karen to lead this HOA moving forward? Not a single hand rose. Then someone called out, should we formally request county oversight and legal review? Every hand shot up. Karen stood frozen, no binder thick enough to hide behind. She left without a word, just walked out, surrounded by stares that weren't angry, they were disappointed. And that's worse, because when people stop fearing you and start seeing you, you don't just lose power, you lose your story. And in a neighborhood like ours, once you lose your story, you're done. I walked out last, with folks clapping my back, nodding, saying thanks. But I wasn't smiling, because I knew Karen, and the way she sat there tonight, silent, composed, calculating, meant only one thing. This wasn't her surrender. This was her retreat, her regroup. You don't build a private surveillance grid just to watch porches. You build it for leverage. And she wasn't done. Not yet. If this part of the story made your jaw drop or your blood boil, do me a favor, hit like so it reaches someone else who needs to hear it. Comment if your HOA ever tried to flip the truth. And subscribe now, because next time I find the camera inside my house, Yeah, you heard that right. My house. And that's when it stops being HOA drama and turns criminal. You think after the HOA meeting the nightmare's over? Think again. The night I thought I'd finally get some sleep, I got an anonymous email with no subject and no message, just a single attachment. I opened it, heart racing, and froze. It was a screenshot from inside my own house, not from any camera I installed, not from my attic vent black box. No, this was from a tiny lens tucked behind my office bookshelf, aimed straight at my desk where I typed these words. The timestamp? A few days before the big HOA meeting. Karen wasn't just watching the neighborhood, she was watching me. Inside my home. Without permission. Without a warrant. That's when I realized this game wasn't just about beige paint or stolen power. It was about invasion. Literal invasion. I called Officer Grant from the sheriff's office and invited him over. I didn't tell him about the hidden camera right away. I didn't want Karen to catch wind before the law got involved. When Grant saw the screenshot, then the tiny camera itself, his polite concern switched to professional urgency. He made 2 calls while still standing in my living room. One to a judge, one to the county cyber crimes unit. Within 48 hours, they had a warrant to seize everything from the HOA office. Karen's laptop, the secret server in the shed, and every digital trace of her shadow surveillance empire. Karen tried to spin it as a neighborly misunderstanding, accused me of jealousy, and said I was out to destroy a successful woman. But the camera in my house? That sealed her fate. The police search was a gold mine. They found blueprints for hidden cameras, detailed scripts Karen planned to use at future HOA meetings, and files labeled by address. Mine was marked Rogue Engineer. They uncovered plans to install sympathetic HOA board members, bought with threats and bribes disguised as community improvements. She had built a shadow government right under the HOA banner, a system for surveillance, manipulation, and profit. He was Law and Competition meets House of Cards. The county didn't waste time. Karen was formally charged with illegal surveillance, fraud, harassment, and misusing HOA funds. Her empire was crumbling. But here's the catch. Even with Karen out, the neighborhood wasn't the same. Trust was shredded. People kept their curtains drawn tighter, doors locked earlier. The cozy block we once knew now felt like a battleground. But something incredible started happening too. The community began to rebuild, not just the security grid, but the spirit that Karen had tried to crush. Phil came back as interim HOA president, and old board members like Nora returned. Nora, who had fled under Karen's threats, told me she never wanted to leave but was scared silent. We rebuilt the solar grid, this time distributing panels across 4 roofs. No more one house holding all the power. We started a rotating oversight committee. Total transparency. Then, out of the blue, the Thompsons, the family whose backyard had been violated by Karen's secret cameras, offered to fund a legal action group. Their goal? To educate HOAs statewide about digital boundaries, privacy rights, and how to prevent abuse like ours. They wanted this nightmare to become a blueprint for vigilance, a warning for every neighborhood thinking their HOA is just about lawn care. I told them I wasn't interested in a board seat. I worked better behind the scenes, as a watchdog, quiet but always watching, not in the creepy Karen way, but the neighborly kind. The night before the new grid went live, I stood on my roof looking over the block. The panels gleamed black and proud, untouched by beige or bullshit. Then, weeks later, a certified letter arrived. No return address, just a small flash drive and a note. Messy handwriting said, "You won this time, but I wasn't working alone." I plugged it in, heart sinking. It was a spreadsheet, a list of HOA leaders, email addresses, vendor contracts, shared logins, and a tab ominously labeled Mutual Interests. Karen wasn't just a rogue queen. She was part of a network, a bigger machine rigging power behind multiple neighborhoods. The realization hit hard. This wasn't a one-off. It was systemic. But I wasn't backing down. I gave the drive to the DA and told them everything I knew. And if you're watching this, thinking one painted roof panel is all it takes to wake a neighborhood up, well, you're right. But it's just the start. Hit like if you believe no power is too small to challenge. Comment if your street deserves the truth. And subscribe because this story, it's only getting bigger.